And we are live. As some of you will see, probably many of you will go to this via a Silicon Curtain, but we are broadcasting this on the Information Warfare Initiative channel. And in fact, this is a bit of an experiment. We're going to be doing more live streams on this and seek to use this platform and the audience that it's built up and maybe launch some other formats on it as well. This format we're calling the Expanding War, and it's part of our series on the Dictators. And of course, it's not just about Ukraine anymore. It's about the Middle East. It's about Greenland. Possibly soon it will be about Taiwan as well, as these various confrontations and conflicts start to mix and merge. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, David D'Abato. I'm going to ask him to go through his list of platforms as well, because if you're not subscribed to his Substack, his channel, then you absolutely should be. You are missing out if you're not. Many of you will know me through Silicon Curtain, but the Information Warfare Initiative is also part of the same network of channels as Silicon Curtain, Silicon Wafers, and now IWI as well. David, over to you. Quick introduction.
Hello. I first have to say, I love Jonathan's voice. He sounds like a BBC announcer, and I just love that. It just, I don't know, makes the hair stand on the back of my neck and all that stuff.
That's the 20 galwas a day or 40 galwas a day. I've got a cold as well, I should explain. That's
Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here. As Jonathan was saying, this is a new initiative. Actually, that's half the name of this channel, but this is a new format for us. We have been doing what we call the Dictators, which is a live stream that we've been doing every Friday, about middle of the day and a little later in the UK. We're excited about that, but we decided we would like to maybe do a fresh start and expand our reach and try to get into some other topics. So this is being launched on Jonathan's Disinformation Initiative channel on YouTube. And I don't know, Jonathan, we may still call it the Dictators. It's just going to be on a different channel. I'm not sure. This is new for both of us, and we're going to see how it goes and tweak it and do what we need to do. It's going to be a shorter format, though, as far as we know. It's going to be condensed. It's going to be about 30 minutes as opposed to the 1 hour format that we've done. I'm still going to have my loud shouting voice, which many people don't like, which is great. And Jonathan, of course, is the voice of reason. So having said that, Jonathan, why don't you kick off this debut episode of this new format?
I should say as well that your shouty voice is produced by AI, because naturally you're very shy, retiring, yes, and a tiny little mouse-like voice.
And this is an avatar. I'm actually a 1 meter tall green alien.
Well, we have this expanding war, and we've been saying for a long time, I think, that if Russia is not tackled in Ukraine, if Russia is not pushed back, then evil, unchecked evil, will only expand, get more malicious, more toxic. It will also spread like a kind of contagion. And I'm afraid that is exactly what we're seeing. And other dictators around the world are learning that the West no longer has the will and capacity to push back and defend its allies, or even defend itself. That's the lesson I take out of this. And unfortunately, this genie is now out of the bottle. We have the Middle East conflagration. We have Greenland threatened. We have Trump now threatening NATO countries once again if they refuse to be dragged into his legal war. And we have a resurgence of Chinese activity around Taiwan. There was a curious lull, which has, given rise to a lot of speculation over the last 2 weeks, but that is now back full force. And my great fear, of course, is that China may use the chaos in the Middle East, the fact that the US is bogged down there and potentially depleted in terms of its air defense and so on, in order to launch its long vaunted or expected Taiwan campaign. And that comes off the back of an extraordinary purge of the army. But David, there's a lot in there. Could you unpack all of that and what you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, China, Xi has been undertaking a massive purging, including the top military officer, the equivalent of their Joint Chiefs of Staff, or the chairman of their Joint Chiefs of Staff, different name. But yeah, they're going through an incredible purge, very similar to what's been going on here in the United States with Trump. He has purged when he took office, he purged all of the senior military officers, or a great deal of them. He fired many of the top military legal officers in the United States military, all of which was to gain a stranglehold on the military, so they do as he says, which I'm sure is the same reason that Xi did what he is doing. You mentioned the fear of this spreading, and my greatest fear right now is not just what you said. You're absolutely correct. It is spreading. Is the fact that the stranglehold, as I mentioned, that President Trump has on the American government, the U.S. Congress, to include the House and the Senate. And he's doing that through fear and intimidation. He constantly stokes the anger of his base, the MAGA faithful who voted for him. And when I say he stokes the fears, he makes them constantly enraged. And if the U.S. Congress does anything to to push back against President Trump, many of these MAGA members, the voters for Trump, physically threaten the U.S. Congress people, men and women, and judges. I can't even name how many times members of Congress and judges and their families have either been threatened or physically attacked because they bothered to criticize President Trump. I'm going to try to put an overlay here very, very quickly of the disconnect between this, in my opinion, mentally deranged president that we have and what's going on in Iran. He recently gave a speech yesterday where he did his little stupid dance, which is just really disgusting, in front of a MAGA crowd while tankers were burning in the Persian Gulf. And this is a photo from that. And this is from French news. They really didn't like that. Here he is doing his little stupid, demented Trump dance while this oil tanker is burning in the Persian Gulf. The disconnect between what's really going on in Iran and the rest of the world and Trump's brain is very, very disgusting, and it's very, very dangerous.
Well, this is the point that Timothy Schneider made, is that Trump is he is acting not as a leader, he is acting as someone who is a participant in some kind of soap opera, some kind of television drama. Do you think if we were able to peer inside his brain, actually he does not have the same model of reality that we do? He does not see the pain and chaos being inflicted. For him, this is just another storyline. This is just something else he needs to keep the world's attention focused on him. If this is true, and Timothy Schneider is correct, this is deeply disturbing, because this is a format that requires ever more punch, ever more escalation to retain attention. And we got 3 more years of this. So you have to think, well, what is he not going to do to keep this keep these episodes, as it were, going?
No, I agree with you. And he's always been this way for the most part. That's his personality, narcissism, and probably a psychopath. But as he's gotten older, and as he most definitely is suffering from some form of dementia or cognitive decline, he has absolutely no control over his outbursts. And unfortunately, this mentally ill, possibly dementia patient is in charge, the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military on earth, and they will do as he says. And the fact that the American voters voted him in office as president of the United States, not once, Jonathan, but twice, knowing exactly who and what he is, to me as an American combat veteran, is deeply, deeply troubling. And as I've said, and you've said on many podcasts, come November, it may be the last straw, the crossing of the red line, if we do not elect a Democratic Congress and Senate, meaning if we do not wrest control of the Republican Party, the MAGA party, back into sane hands, I fear it's all over. This lunatic will remain in power for not only another 3 years until he dies, but whoever comes after him in the MAGA party, I believe, will be just as bad and possibly worse.
J.D. Vance, of course, comes to mind in that
Yes.
context.
Yes.
Something else that Ben Meiselas at the Midas Touch, made I think, a sort of interesting point is, and this also connects with my experience of Russia. We know that Trump, in some ways, follows, in some respects, a Russian playbook because he understands that sort of criminal mentality to the world and to power. But what criminals seek to do is to increase their circle of criminality and impunity by involving people in their crimes, making people complicit in their crimes. And it seems to me that Trump has achieved this because after the 6th of January, he was able to make a large part of the Republican Party complicit in his absolute illegality, which meant it's more difficult for them to challenge him later. Now he's seeking to make, well, then he had his board of peace. He's seeking to make various countries sort of complicit in his global illegality. Well, of course, only those states that had a high level, I would say, of corruption, nepotism, illegality kind of joined that board of peace anyway. So that maybe didn't succeed in the way he hoped, not a full alternative to the UN. Now, however, he's trying to drag countries into his illegal war against Iran. This is another way in which the criminal mindset seeks to draw people in, make them complicit, which means they can no longer resist. How important is it now, in that sense, that world leaders stand up and say, no, no, we will not form part of your, fleet to open up the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, technically, there's all sorts of issues with there as well. But how important is it for them to morally and politically stand up and push back against him?
Before I answer, that's a great question. I want to say hello to one of our viewers, Andy Woohoo. How you doing? He's followed me for some time, and I just want to say hello and thanks for being here. In answer to your question, Jonathan, I think it's extremely important, but it's been extremely important since January 20th of last year when Donald Trump took office. I mean, I've made I haven't been silent on the fact that I've been very disappointed at the cowardice of the leaders of Europe, the European leaders, both EU and NATO, for not standing up to Donald Trump, for not pushing back against Donald Trump. Yes, I know the reasons. They are still wholly dependent on the United States, not just financially, but militarily. I understand that. But, they're going to just ruin them. They're going to lead themselves down the path of destruction if they don't wean themselves off of the United States like now, like yesterday. And it's going to be tough, but it's a matter of, it's an existential problem. They cannot depend on the United States, mostly because of Donald Trump, but now because of MAGA and the fact that MAGA, the Republican Party, the traitors, are going to continue well past the expiration date of Donald Trump. So, yeah, it's extremely important that they stand up to him and not do what he asks in the Persian Gulf. However, I understand also, Jonathan, they've got to send some support for their own citizens, which is primarily what they're doing. They're not doing this, I don't think, for the most part, just because Donald Trump asked them to or ordered them to. And yes, even though some nations are bending knee still to Trump in terms of the Iran war, I think for the most part they're getting it, but they're getting it far too slow. And I question whether or not when this war expands, not if, they're going to be able to handle their own defense and not just support their citizens overseas or even to support any other country, much less their own. So that's a real problem. And that all comes from the fact that they've depended on America for too long, have been lazy, and now they're just, I'm sorry, they're cowards for the most part.
So, what is there? This might be a very quick answer because you might say none at all, but what pushback is there from within the US system, within Congress, Senate, etc., pushing back on what still essentially is an illegal military act because he has not gone through the mandated processes? He has not sought permission to do this. and it doesn't look like he is well likely to do that anytime soon.
The only shred of hope is within the U.S. Congress is that several members of the Republican Party, not the diehard MAGA Republicans, are resigning. They are not seeking reelection, and some of them are now speaking out and pushing back against Donald Trump. They are not yet big in number. They're not yet enough to sway the other Republicans who have a stranglehold on the Congress, but there's more and more of them. And I just want to point out, Jonathan, and also for the viewers, that the Republicans hold, I think now it's down to a 2 or 3 vote difference in the U.S. Congress. It's razor thin. And almost every week it's getting less as members resign or decide not to run again. Or in some of the special elections we've been having, Democrats have flipped the seat, the congressional seat, to a Democrat. So they don't hold a very strong majority. It's a little different in the Senate, where they have a much bigger majority. But in terms of directly trying to answer your question, I don't predict that the Republicans are going to push back enough, or that there's enough Democrats to change the stranglehold that MAGA has on the U.S. government before our elections in November. It's just crucial that the Democrats win the election, at least in the Congress, and hopefully in the Senate as well. If they don't, again, and I'll keep saying this till the election, if they don't, if the Republicans continue to hold the majority in the Congress, the House rather, in the Senate, I believe we're doomed. I don't think that MAGA under Trump or any of his successors is ever going to surrender power in this country, and we will become 100% official fascist dictatorship. And I'm ready for all the hate comments on that, because if you don't know that, if you don't believe that, well, you're obviously one of those hardcore brainwashed MAGA members, and I don't really listen to you too much.
This is where I think it gets tragic but interesting, because we see in Russia that full-scale war over an extended period has allowed Putin to hollow out society, force out anyone who was likely to resist or not be compliant with his war, or even express the sort of vaguest discontent with it. They all were allowed to leave. The rest either have no power, relatively uneducated, not able to resist, or not even minded to resist because of their backgrounds and so on, and the coercion that's there, and of course we know the money that's being paid for people to participate, or they're in the main capitals, St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, Petersburg, Moscow, where they're essentially being given some kind of get out clause. In fact, it's been made very profitable for hundreds of thousands of people to help build his military machine and carry on supporting it. Plus, there's the fear there. What happens if Trump is dragged into, and there's indications this may be happening, a ground war with ever increasing numbers of troops, as we saw in Vietnam? It starts as a little exercise to do this and that and secure this island and here and whatever. Is the US likely to not go quietly into that, as Russia has done, but actually we'll start to see mass protests, as we did against Vietnam, if you start to see escalating numbers of, won't even be military trainers at this point, but they'll give some euphemism to it, but tens of thousands of troops, and potentially a huge number of casualties starting to return?
Well, it's a great question, of course. It's not an exact parallel to Vietnam, of course, but what you're saying does have some of the hallmarks of how we got dragged into Vietnam. For those watching who do not know, Trump has made the decision to send a Marine Expeditionary Force, MEU, into the Persian Gulf to seize Karg Island, which is their largest oil refining and shipment facility. It's in the Persian Gulf, just off the coast of Iran, and it was just bombed, heavily bombed by the United States, where Trump claimed he had destroyed all the facilities there. That may be true. And now he's sending, as you just said, ground troops, the Marines. And I have no doubt they can hold that island. It's going to be approximately 2,000 to 2,500 Marines. I have no doubt they can take and seize and hold that island. The problem is what happens after that. They are surrounded on at least one side on the Iranian mainland by very high cliffs. I think they're about 1,000 meters high, or at least 500 meters high, overlooking Karg Island. There's many, many caves, and there are going to be spotters and other Iranians with missiles and all kinds of nasty surprises for those Marines. They're looking down on Karg Island, which is relatively flat. They're going to be attacked day and night, Jonathan. It's going to be horrendous. They will suffer horrendous casualties. And then what does America do? Trump's already talked about it. He's getting ready to send the 82nd Airborne to start onto the Iranian homeland. Where? Not sure. Probably Tehran. That would be a disaster. He's going to send American aircraft over Iran to Tehran and then drop them into the Tehran area. Okay. Assuming many of them don't get shot out of the sky, what do they do once they're there? How are they resupplied? What about when their ammunition runs out, their food runs out, their water runs out? And the Iranian people, believe it or not, are not going to greet them with open arms and flowers and kisses. It's going to be pretty bad. That will be a disaster. And then what do? Send more troops in. And that's where the Vietnam analogy does kick in. Look, this is an unmitigated disaster for America. And what does Europe do when Iran does? And they will start doing hybrid or increasing hybrid warfare, terrorist attacks in Europe, which they are going to do. How is NATO, how are the European countries individually going to respond to that when many of their resources are now either in the Mediterranean or in the Persian Gulf? I believe France just sent half of its fleet to the Persian Gulf and into the Mediterranean. And Italy has sent many of its air defense systems into the region, and on and on and on. They themselves are saying, we're afraid that we will not be able to protect ourselves if there are an increase in hybrid warfare, or if, God forbid, Russia does take this time to launch some kind of an attack on NATO, whether that be drones, increased hybrid warfare, or actual, kinetic warfare where they march over the border. Look, this is a disaster. I could go on and on, but we have a relatively short time today. So, I see more American ground troops going into Iran, and I see more American casualties. That's a disgrace and a disaster.
And the last bit we'll focus on in this, I think, is a set of comments which are not going to discourage Ukraine, because Ukraine is doing what it needs to do. Ukraine is working with actually multiple agencies within US government to help supply drones. It's working with US partners across the Gulf as well to get its own, not just interceptors, but its expert teams who can actually operate them and tweak them in the field and adapt tactics. Ukraine has offered to do this and is doing this, and it's working with, dare I say it, adult people in various organizations on that. Trump comes out and says, I think he said it twice or even 3 times now, no, we don't need Ukraine. We don't need their stuff. We don't need their drones. Basically saying, you can all go to hell. What is that all about? Well, we kind of know, but what is that all about? And why has he placed himself in the extraordinary position of beating up on the one country in the world that actually is now required to save his butt, quite frankly?
Well, look, Trump hates Zelensky. I mean, it really does come down to that. And Trump has historically had very thin skin. Zelensky recently has dissed him more than other European leaders. They all should have, but Zelensky's finally decided that, look, this is over. I don't have to keep kissing Trump's ass anymore. I'm not going to attack him publicly, which he hasn't, but he's also not kissing his ass. He's telling the truth. And when he offered the, like you just said, the drone assistance, including technicians and trainers and so forth, Trump, like any bully, like any narcissist, like any psychopath, with thin skin rejected it. He had to show who's in charge. And so this is just a personality thing. It's Trump doesn't think of terms of strategy or tactics. He really doesn't care. He also doesn't care about the number of Americans who may be wounded or killed. And he doesn't even care about the American economy and how we are starting to suffer just based on the brief war in Iran. This is just a reaction, Jonathan, a knee-jerk reaction to someone that he hates. And he's not going to allow this person to help him. And his ego is so huge, this megalomaniac, that he can't admit that he and America, for which he is the king, needs help from anyone, including this pissant from Ukraine, who he really hates. And I'm sorry to say, that's about all that's about.
And is there another element there? He hates Ukraine. Obviously, there's specific reasons, but he hates Ukraine because he idolizes Putin. And Ukraine is Putin's number one enemy. You know, it's vicarious kind of loathing.
Absolutely. No, that's a part of it for sure. He's not going to help or accept help from Putin's enemy, from a country that Putin is at war with and constantly disparages and so forth. So sure, that's an element of that. And all of the things that you just talked about, the hollowing out of the citizenry in Russia, for example, that's something that Trump is doing now. You know, Putin is his hero. He thinks it's his best forever friend. Of course, Putin thinks that Trump is an idiot and a moron, and he's leading him around by the nose. But, you know, Trump wants to try to please his buddy. So he is doing many of the things that Putin is doing in Russia, some of them reflexively, because he doesn't think about a lot of things in advance. He just does them. But he sees what Putin is doing, and he approves 100%. So he is definitely doing in America what Putin has successfully done for the last 20 odd years in Russia, in just hollowing out and killing, crushing any dissent in Russia. Trump is doing that right now. But Jonathan, he's done that only in the course of a little over a year. Just think, if he is successful in the elections, where we will be in America at this time next year.
And we have our first participant in this who has used the TDS moniker, accusing us of not
excellent.
Seeing.
Where have you been hiding? Who is this?
Yes, that guy Kyle. So,
hey Kyle, what's going on?
Not understanding the deep strategic underpinnings of this whole operation. And I don't want to, I don't want to sort of, piss on that necessarily, because
let me do that. Sure, I understand.
Let you do that, but let me put a scenario here.
Yeah.
If China, and we know there's been a military sort of clean out there, I think it's because there are a lot of people who were saying, do you know what, we're not ready. Okay, we're all up for invading Taiwan, but we're not ready. And Xi didn't want to hear that. I think that's what's going on here.
Oh, very possibly.
Strategy. If we talk about strategy, conniving with Russia and maybe Israel to try to persuade Trump to invade Iran, get tied up in the Middle East, expend its munitions and resources, leaving the way open for a Taiwan invasion, that is truly strategic. If that's what's going on, and history and events will show whether that's the case or not, that's truly strategic, not just attacking Iran. Because
what's going on right now, Jonathan?
Netanyahu made me do it, or on a whim or whatever.
Right now, as we speak, a Chinese fleet is steaming towards Taiwan. I believe they left sometime yesterday, larger than has been happening in the last several exercises where they've done that. And I think everything you said is correct. I don't know if Xi is choosing this particular time to play his hand in Taiwan. Maybe not, maybe yes. But there is a Chinese fleet, a larger one than has been seen recently, steaming towards Taiwan, which isn't that far from the Chinese mainland anyway. So he's definitely been waiting to see when the time is right. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's why he dismissed most of the senior leadership within the People's Army. I don't know, but he's going to launch an offensive against Taiwan. I don't think that's a secret for anybody. And I don't think that Trump is going to lift a finger when that happens. So stay tuned for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to get some experts on chip manufacturing, etc., because understanding the impact. Well, oil is having an impact on the global economy. Denial of Taiwanese chips, very advanced chips, to the global economy. That could have a serious dent. And if China then controls that supply, that access, it may make sort of, fairly standard consumer electronics available still. It
Yep.
may block the high-end chips because it's seeking to slow down the US advance in terms of AI. So I think there's a lot of strategic direction to the idea that actually something like that may well happen. And it's not necessarily World War III, and we probably are going to call it that when it does happen. But this is about China gaining more of the levers. I mean, unlike Russia that just wants to strangle and destroy everything because it's, as Joe Lindsley calls it, the school shooter of nations. It's a nihilistic entity. China is all about gathering the levers of power to itself, not necessarily burning down the world in order to do it.
Exactly. It doesn't want to burn down the world. It wants to make money off the world, which Trump says he wants to do, except he's burning the bridges behind him. Look, I want to say something that's going to shock you, Jonathan, and maybe a lot of the viewers. I'm actually going to agree with at least one thing that guy Kyle just said in the comments section, my MAGA buddy out here. He said that Russia and Iran are the biggest dangers, destabilization factors in the world. I don't know about Iran, although I don't like Iran and I don't like the Ayatollahs at all. But I will agree that Russia right now is the biggest threat to the United States. So my question to that guy, Kyle, and any other Trump supporters out there, if that's the case, that Russia is the biggest threat or one of the biggest threats to the world, especially the United States, why is Trump kissing Putin's ass all the time? Why is he not putting a stranglehold on the Russian economy like he could? Why has he
lifting
stopped
oil
supporting
sanctions?
Ukraine? Yes, he lifted
That's
oil
the opposite
sanctions
of
off the shadow fleet.
strategic. Yeah.
Yes. Why has he stopped supporting Ukraine? Why didn't he defeat Russia the week he came into power last year and give Ukraine, Zelensky, everything that he needed? I'd be really interested to see what that guy Kyle or any other MAGA people have to say about Trump's treatment of Vladimir Putin.
Exactly. I don't think Carl is operating as a troll here. I think he is putting various points of view that can be debated.
That's why I'm responding to him. Yes.
Yeah, that could and should be debated and actually a little more nuanced. So I'm not even sure he's an out-and-out sort of MAGA there. He said something borderline positive about Biden. I'm not sure Biden certainly has tried to, relocate advanced chip manufacturing to the US because he saw that as a strategic weakness. I'm not sure that process is complete or that it could be completed in just a few years. So I'm guessing that process is ongoing. But of course, the strategic direction is very important. On sourcing, actually manufacturing, basic metallurgy and advanced chips. I think every country that wants to play in this arena of modern warfare is going to have native capabilities at all of these things. We got a huge learning curve to build out our defense and deterrence, especially in Europe, where we really embraced globalization. I would say hook, line, and sinker, as it were, much to our detriment in terms of defense and ability to defend ourselves. Not all countries. Finland, I think, has retained some of these, what it calls sort of, strategic industries. We're over time here. We're going to aim to do these for just half an hour at a time. Do you want to close it out with a sort of statement? And we are, just to let everyone know, going to do this daily for half an hour to see if we can build a bit of an audience for this.
Well, I'm going to close on a positive note. And I think that guy, Kyle, was the reason for it. Look, we have been saying off air for a long time, Jonathan, we want to open up discussions with people that support Trump, the people who support the far right or what is called extreme right. I want to open up that discussion. We have to come together, both not just here in the States, in the UK and all over Europe. We need to come together, meaning the left, the right, and the center. And you're right. I think that guy, Kyle, is not just he's certainly not a troll. He's made some good points that need to be discussed. I think we may have opened up something that we have been trying to do for a long time. Digital town halls, if you will, discussions between people with disparate, various attitudes and opinions, which may not agree with each other, but should be discussed. So, folks, we're going to be doing this, as Jonathan said, every day that we can, at least 5 days a week for 30 minutes on this channel. Please get the word out there and hopefully join us every day. And we're going to do the very best we can to open up the discussions for people with all kinds of different opinions. And that's how I'd like to close it anyway.
Yeah, that's a great positioning there. Do tune in tomorrow, I was going to say next week, not next week. Do tune in tomorrow. We will be having an intense focus on the Middle East because that, of course, is the unfolding a hotspot, but we will be mentioning Ukraine as well, which remains absolutely pivotal to the advancing, let's say, drone ecosystem and the ability to push back against authoritarian aggression. For now, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us.